There is a line of dialogue in this movie that goes, I'm a real boy and you're an amoeba. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to that channel, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. Venom 1 was not something that I was very particularly fond of. I thought it was overly long, very chaotic and confusing. You couldn't make out the fight sequence, and I really didn't like the huge left that Sony took with the liberties of Venom and its characterization versus what is in the comics. It became more of a mask, Jim Carrey's The Mask, than it did Venom, where the relationship between the two of them, because he's the hero in these films, because there's no Spider-Man, he can't really be the anti-hero or the anti-villain. They have to make him a hero, and so we just get this back and forth comedic stuff that just happens way too much. And so I didn't like any of that. So I went into this without much expectations, and I will say that probably was for the best, because while this is not a tremendously better film, I think because of the short runtime, they are able to much better hide the wars that they had in this film than they were in the first. Venom 2 picks up pretty quickly after the first events. Seems to be some time that is spaced out, but not enough that either Anne or Eddie have sort of reconciled or falling completely apart, but enough time to say we still need to work on things. But my biggest thing with this film, and in that it's like about 80 plus minutes, 85, 87 minutes, is that I spend the first 20, 25 minutes of the movie sort of at this breakneck speed. Like it's moving at a pace where it's like cutscene, flashback, cutscene, moving to the next piece, this, and we don't really. I feel like I'm a step behind the entire first act of this movie, which is not necessarily a good thing, but it's just like I'm playing just a bit of a game of catch up. Then we finally just slow down a little bit, and we have the moment where we kind of revert back to our old ways of Eddie and Venom playing this two-man slapstick three Stooges bits where they're beating up on each other and talking about each other. It gets old fast, but at least in this film, whereas in the previous, it was we kept repeating and kept doing that over and over and over again. Here, it's done once to kind of separate the two of them, and then we sort of move on, and we don't really get to have to sit through so much of them just beating the crap out of each other. And because we're moving at a speed so quickly, they take some liberties and some interesting ways to sort of give us exposition. There's this cool thing where Cletus writes Brock a note, and you sort of get imagery of what that past was for Cletus, and sort of these drawings that happen in the background while showing them sort of looking at it. It's a cool little shot. It's a cool little thing to sort of get the exposition out there, explain it to the audience in the short, truncated time that you have here. The dialogue in this movie is atrocious. I sort of mentioned it at the very beginning. It is bad. It is laughably bad. And look, maybe they just need better screenwriters. I don't know what the deal is, but it is not. There are so many moments that I just, if I were in a theater by myself or if I were at home, I would just say, laugh or say what the fuck. Luckily, I had a mask on, so you couldn't really see me mouthing what the fuck or rolling my eyes all the time. But yeah, there's a lot of dialogue in it that's just bad. What these films do that I think can be off-putting to a lot of folks that like comic properties. A lot of comic book movies nowadays take their characters serious. Like, yes, they are characters from a book, from art, from wherever, but they handle them and they perform them in a way that still feels grounded or somewhat serious. Tom, Woody, and Naomie are all playing this as if they're playing to the back row of a massive theater. Like they are playing caricatures of something. And so there's never really an ability to connect with any of these people. it just feels like you're watching people go through the motions of being these characters because this is how this character acts, this is how this character looks. Superhero movie, I'm going big. Instead of playing it somewhat realistic, you sort of get this like over the top fun fest, if you will. And look, if you take it for that, if you take it for knowing that as a Marvel fan, as a Venom fan, you're not going to see a version of Venom in these interests with Tom Hardy playing them that you would expect from the comics. They're not going to be a one-to-one. Same with Carnage. You're not going to get a one-to-one. If you can go in and accept that, then I think you might have some fun. Because for me, this movie knows a lot better when to get in and get out and not overstay its welcome. None of the dialogue works. It all just feels a little hokey and corny. But what does work for me, when we finally get to the final act and these two behemoth characters that at the very least look like Venom and Carnage, they may not act like or may not be what I consider the embodiment to be, but they look like Carnage and Venom when they fight in this church. It looks pretty damn awesome. And that is sort of what you get out of your head and say, hey, this movie's not this, and this, and this. When you get to your big kid side of yourself and you're like, hey, I just got to see Carnage and Venom fight on screen, that's when it's somewhat worthwhile. Now the problem is still, because they haven't been grounded, I don't feel any sort of relationship to these characters, and because we've sped along so quickly through the first act, which we're trying to lay the ground print for Shriek and Carnage to sort of be a thing, none of it works. So it's like, yes, I'm watching these cool animatronic video game characters fight each other. It means nothing. So outside of the established relationship that was with Anne and Eddie in the first film, nothing here sort of has laid the groundwork for me to care or have much weight, emotional weight to the fight sequences. So outside of them just looking cool, you get nothing with those fight sequences at the very end. But it is pretty damn cool to see it all happen. But brisk, you're in and out, 83 minutes. You can't really get that mad at a film that knows, hey, I'm not going to waste your time. You know what we're here for. Let's get to it. There are Easter eggs thrown throughout. We get a hint of, if this does get a Venom 3, probably Toxin will be more or less the villain that is in there, or ally, depending on if they put another big bad and have these two together. Although, again, not quite created the same way that Toxin is sort of in the comics, but it seems like there's a lot of liberties being played with Venom in this series. I know what everybody's been sort of talking about is the post-credit sequence, which it sort of sucks that the best thing that a lot of people are going to speak about with this film is the scene that happens when the movie's over with, and it is establishing connections to something of a series that is significantly better. But we get a post-credit sequence with Venom and Eddie kind of on the run. They're sort of not in the place where they're going to be the quote-unquote lethal protectors, which is what they're known in the comics, but in a very different way. But they're sort of on the run, and they're off in a hotel watching some tacky telenovela. And Venom starts talking to Eddie like, hey, there's some things that I have gone through. Like, I have years and years of knowledge and universes in my brain that you just will never fathom. And Eddie's like, what are you talking about? No, you don't. I've been with you for a while now. You don't have that much. And Venom says, let me show you. And what seems to happen is that whatever multiverse switching that either Wanda or whomever is doing sets in sort of a wave that sort of just changes whatever world they're in. So whatever they were before, they're now in a different place and in a hotel that doesn't belong to them because there's somebody else in the bathroom. But they see J.K. Simmons as our favorite news reporter screaming at the top of his, Jonah Jameson, and it's the end sequence of Spider-Man when he lets people know that he is Peter Parker, and Venom licks the screen and kind of like, this boy, this guy, and basically what we're getting is that we're saying, don't know when, don't know how, but if we want to play in this world, Marvel has allowed us to say that we can exist in the same world, so we can sort of connect this stuff together. I'm twofold on that. Part of me is like, oh, cool, it'll be cool to see Spider-Man play with Venom. But I'm not, because like I said earlier, the way that there's so much heart, weight, and heft, if you will, to the Spider-Man stuff, that I don't want this version of Venom to interact with that version of Spider-Man. I'd rather we sort of get a reset on one, or if we're gonna dumb down Spider-Man, let's dumb down and just have a hokey little slapstick mask version of that play with this Venom. But these worlds for me don't quite mesh, so I don't really want this version of Venom to play with this version of Spider-Man. But that's just me. I know people are like, oh, shut up, I want to see Spider-Man and Venom together. I do too. I just want a more accurate depiction of Venom to play with that. But all in all, I'll probably never watch this film again, but it is certainly a better entry for me than the first, because it gets in, gets out. So on my scale of once it's enough, play it again, Sam, or give me a time zone so I never have to think about this film again. This still once is enough. I won't watch it again, but I also don't hate it as much as I did the first Venom. It's a slight improvement on the previous, because I think the action, at least in this one, is clear. I can see what's happening, and it looks pretty damn cool when you're in it. If you can just ignore all the fluff and stuff to get to that point for 82 minutes, just to buy a ticket to go see those last 20 minutes, I think is it's kind of worth it. Just if you're a fan of either Venom, Carnage, or that world of Spider-Man. But those are my thoughts. What did you guys think about Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage? Go ahead and leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI, or you can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDid@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name. That's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.